Hi, my name is Dr. Felucia. I'm a licensed psychologist, and in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about why you must learn to become immune to guilt if you are going to recover from psychological and spiritual abuse. Now, as you're hearing that, you probably are wondering, well, what does becoming immune to guilt even look like, and why would I want to do that? As people who have been on the receiving end of psychological abuse and manipulation, you probably are not wanting to think of yourself as someone who is unaffected by guilt. And I understand that, and that's not necessarily what I'm saying here. So if you want to understand more, keep watching. And also, I would also recommend that you look at my other videos on spiritual abuse and gaslighting, understand more about the context of this. So back to what I'm saying. What is becoming immune to guilt, and why would you want to become immune to that? Well, I'll explain what it is not, first of all. Okay, so when there are, guilt is not necessarily a bad thing. We all have felt guilt from time to time, and sometimes guilt can be a warning to us or a prompt that we need to make amends, that we didn't do something that was kind or beneficial to somebody else, right? So there are times where we feel guilt and it's true guilt and we need to act on it. The difficulty and the problem here is that when people have been on the receiving end of a lot of manipulative behavior, psychological abuse, spiritual abuse, their guilt is in overdrive, right? And so people who, and also it can do this kind of overdrive guilt reaction can be there because of how you were raised, right? If you were raised in a home where your household was kind of run by manipulation, and instead of people just being direct about what they like, then you oftentimes were fueled by feelings of guilt, and they are probably often false feelings of guilt. And so as somebody who has been through, either psychological abuse, spiritual abuse, or anything on that spectrum, it's important for you to understand and recognize when you are operating out of guilt. A lot of times people react to guilt, and they believe that they have to do something because they feel guilty. So they feel guilty, they react, and it's not even a conscious reaction a lot of times. And the reason you need to be aware of this and become immune to this is because people who abuse others psychologically rely on guilt as their way of controlling other people. In one of my prior videos, a commenter said that they felt very frustrated because in a lot of churches that they had been to, in spiritual environments, they felt that people controlled other people through false guilt, right, and manipulation. And that is, not uncommon in these types of environments. That's pretty much how they act and how the people in these environments act. And so when I say becoming immune to guilt, what I mean is that you don't react to it right away, right? Or you choose to delay your reaction or not even react to that guilt, right? Instead of having this knee-jerk reaction to it. So if you think about somebody who is allergic to something, the minute that they are in the presence of that allergen, they react, right? Their body rejects it. They, might break out in hives. Their eyes might water. Whatever it is, their body is saying that I cannot tolerate this, right? And when people have been through abuse, especially psychological abuse and spiritual abuse, they react to guilt in the same way. So if there's any inkling of guilt, they have to do something about it because they look at that guilt as something that is dangerous. And that's not true. Now, I'm not shaming anybody for feeling that way. You have to remember that these are how these environments and people operate. They operate off the assumption that, and it's a true assumption, that we don't like to feel guilty, right? It's kind of inbuilt to us. And so when people are using this guilt, they're going to expect you to react out of feeling guilty. And that's manipulation, because people need to just say what they want and give you the choice to either go along with their suggestion or not go along with their suggestion, right? And so guilt is being used to circumvent your ability to choose for yourself what you want. I'm going to take a minute here. If you have not already subscribed to this channel, please do me a big favor and subscribe to this channel if you want to, but it would really help this channel and the content of this channel get out to other people that could benefit from it. Okay, so and if you haven't already too, please like the video if you found it helpful, and comment if you feel like you have something to share with others. Okay, so back to the being immune to guilt, right? How do you do that? First of all, you want to differentiate between feeling guilty and making amends, or just feeling guilty and trying to get rid of that guilty feeling. There have been times where we've all been, felt convicted about something, said, oh, you know what, I need to make amends, I need to make things right. And when you do that, it is usually, or the way I believe it should be done, is done in a conscious way, right? You are responding rather than reacting. You're taking time to realize what you've done and how you can make amends. When people use manipulation, you are, basically you are kind of being trained to just get rid of that guilty feeling and do whatever you need to do so that you don't feel guilty. And a lot of times when that happens, you're taking responsibility for something that's not yours, right? So it could be somebody else's upset feelings because you're not going along with what they want. So in response to that, you want to become immune to guilt. So let's say somebody says, well, they wanted you to attend some sort of functioning or some sort of function, right? And you did not want to go. And so you're like, you know what? That's not going to be possible for me this time. I can't go. And then the person goes on and on about how important it would be for you to attend and all these bad things that are going to happen to them if they don't see you there. They're going to feel awful. It won't be the same, all these other things. They're doing this because they hope that you will feel guilty and give in. And what it being immune to guilt looks like is not trying to force the guilt away. In other words, you're going to expect that you are going to feel guilty, but you're not necessarily going to react to it. And this is really important. And this is also a hallmark of being emotionally healthy, is that you realize that there are emotions that make you feel difficult, that make you feel uncomfortable, perhaps. They're difficult to process in the time, but you don't have this knee-jerk reaction of, I have to get rid of it right away. And when you have been on the receiving end of psychological abuse, spiritual abuse, any type of abusive behavior, actually responding to that guilt like you did when you were in that abuse probably had a protective mechanism, right? Sometimes, a lot of times when there's abuse, there is a power differential, not all the time, but oftentimes there is. And so by acquiescing to the person who has more power and acquiescing to their demands, you're kept safe momentarily, right? And so it's important to recognize that and not beat yourself up about responding, or rather reacting out of guilt. At the same time, you also want to make sure that as you are progressing through your recovery, that you are not just reacting every time you feel guilty, right? And again, this is something that's so common in people who have been who've been abused psychologically, spiritually. They have that guilty feeling and they feel so horrible about it, and they're going to do whatever they can to get rid of it without even realizing it. So it might be apologizing for something that you did not, that was not wrong necessarily, right? Or it could be going overboard to make amends for something that you really don't need to make amends for, right? And so how do you, again, deal with this feeling of guilt in which you are becoming kind of immune to it, like I had said before? Well, the first thing is you want to remember, and this is the most important thing, is that you are going to feel guilty, right? The guilt is there. For a lot of people, the guilt may, feelings of false guilt may diminish over time, but sometimes they're just there. So you want to make your goal not to get rid of the guilt, but rather to respond to it in a way that aligns with your values and what you want to do. In other words, you want to make sure that as you are responding to that guilt, it is because you want to do that thing, not to make somebody else happy. Okay, so, and another thing to remember too is that people who use guilt to manipulate others do so for a reason. And they do that because they know that using guilt works, right? That's how we, as humans, are, I think, wired to a degree. And then also knowing that they have that power, or there's this perceived power differential, they're going to also use that guilt to their advantage. And so it's really important that you understand how abusive people work. And even if there isn't a power differential, if they know you and they know that you are somebody who wants to, maybe who values relationships, whatever it is that you value, they're going to use guilt to poke at that. And so you want to make sure that as you are taking all this information in and as you're recovering, that you recognize how guilt has played a role in your life. Something that I would recommend doing is taking a step back, looking through your life and thinking, well, when did I respond out of guilt? And was that the best decision at the time? And another thing I want you to remember too is that the next time you feel guilty, don't react right away, right? Take some time to observe your guilt, but not from that feeling of intense emotion, because guilt can be very intense and we don't like to feel it. So take a step back and observe how you are reacting to that guilt. Ask yourself, is this something I really need to feel guilty over, or is this other person's issue? Okay, so those are important things to remember. And again, when I talk about being immune to guilt, I don't mean that you don't make amends if there's something that you did wrong. What I am saying is don't react impulsively as a way to get rid of guilt. You want to learn how to manage that guilt and understand that, yeah, it's probably going to be there, but is this something that I really need to, I guess, give in to somebody else because you're feeling it, okay? So for more information, if you'd like to book a consultation regarding your recovery from psychological or spiritual abuse, you can go to my website, skillsetcounseling.com, and click on the orange button, or you can also click on the link in the description box. All right. I hope you have a wonderful day that's filled with peace. And I'd also love to hear from you in the comments if you can identify with any of this and maybe tips that you have for other people. All right. Have a great day. Bye-bye.